God's walked in.
Rejoice together, for the time we are living in is the time for reclaiming our own. Brothers, listen to me.
Did you know that God's walk hit? Did you know God's walk hit?
All right, welcome everybody. We are live. Welcome to On Deck. This is all about being black in America. We have our usual crew, Miss Minnie Jones. How you doing? Anif Nelson's in the house. Rob Jones is in the house. We have my man, Professor Mac, who is with us from time to time. We're glad you can join us today. Then we have a number of special guests. We have my man Tai Allen out of Brooklyn, New York. Brother Earl out of Harlem, New York. We have Tom Shepard out of the Bronx. Then we have one of my favorites, Miss Tanisha Arena, Springfield's own. She's the executive director of Arise for Social Justice here in the city. So we want to have this conversation. I hope I didn't miss anybody. We want to have this conversation about the most recent election. It was a long one. Took a couple of days. We got through it. And Brother Earl's boy, Donald Trump, has been terminated, effective as of January.
Shots fired.
So with that being said, I want to hear people's thoughts on this election, who they had expected to get in, who they were actually pulling for. Were you neutral with all this? What are the expectations? What are we looking for from President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris and the cabinet that they choose? So with that being said, I'm just going to open the floor. Who would like to talk about this election? Number of issues on the table that impact us.
My hand is up. My hand is up because you already threw me a jab. I might as well swing back.
I didn't throw a jab. I'm innocent.
Yeah, okay. All right. My mama told me not to throw a stone, and I have my hand. So, okay.
You bigger than me.
Not by much.
Go ahead, Brother Earl.
I mean, this election, needless to say, was extremely fascinating on so many levels. How black folk tend to equate one party being good and the other party being bad. When Malcolm told us 60 years ago that Republicans are wolves and Democrats are foxes, okay? Matter of fact, Malcolm called us a chump for just blindly supporting the Democrats with no tangible returns. And I just think on some level we have lost the lessons of Malcolm and even H. Rap Brown on this. So that's the first thing I want to say. Secondly, with that being said, I mean, these are both both are slave masters. Like, sitting here and hollering over which slave master's going to run the plantation. None of them have shown a real affinity for changing our circumstances. Okay. I hope that because the battle lines are drawn so fiercely that black folks are going to keep the same energy. Once Biden becomes president, I'm going to be looking very keenly at what he does in these first 100 days, okay, by legislation or executive order. And I am not just being in the back of the line. For all this, we better be in the front of the line. Bottom line, we better be in front of the line. I don't want to hear shit else about anything else unless we in front of the line. We waited long enough.
So
he needed us.
If we're in front of the line, I hear everything you're saying. If we're in front of the line, what exactly are we asking for? What are our expectations?
I think we, through proxy, are for all intents and purposes second-class citizens in this country. We have allowed the civil rights legislation to be co-opted to the point that the LGBT community is more the protected class than we are. Okay, that's got to change. And even though I know this is going, I had several arguments already on this. I thought what Cube tried to do was at least towards that vein where he was like, yo, what's in it for us? This is what that needs to be addressed. And We never really got on Biden as to truly outlining what he was going to do for us. Okay, I
Okay.
thought some of the things broken out in his proposal. Of course, he needs some more help in rounding it out. But there were some good things to start there. Okay, this country has benefited from at least 300 years of completely free labor, either slavery or the convict leasing system. At least 300 years of absolutely free labor, at least, and another 125 years of labor, subsidized labor, where we was paid real cheaply. Okay, the wealth of this country has been attained primarily through our labor. But there has to be something that instigates transfer of wealth.
And it's interesting you mentioned the LGBTQ community. They're structured, they're organized, and they're advocating. So when they knock on the door, they know what to ask for. So the other piece is when we look at that particular community, family members, best friends, close friends who are part of that community, but they're also Black. And the minute they walk through the door, I think as it pertains, we're talking about Black people. So as they walk through the door, we're all family. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Other than that, when we talk about structural leadership and leadership, again, we talk about being the first ones at that door. We can't come, and no disrespect towards you, Brother Earl. It's not about you. It's just conversation.
I'm not taking it personal.
I know that. But it just can't be about history lessons. We have to come with a plan and a process. So anybody else want to jump in?
Can I raise my hand?
Huh?
So, all right. I have, I guess, an alternative view. First, by saying, everyone, good evening. Good afternoon, everybody. We have reached a point in society where the niche needs are neither greater nor lesser than other niche needs.
Correct.
That's one. Two, the full understanding of white supremacy has to be in three ways. Then go to answer your question. One is based around controlling three things to create commerce. That is racism, xenophobia, and classism over their own folk. If you try to separate one from the other, you lose sight of the larger picture. And they want you to do that. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm going to stop being pro-Black tomorrow. It means that when I'm coming to the table for legislation like I'm doing now, is to make sure Black folks are at the table for equity and to also increase the equity of others. Because if you don't increase the equity of others, nobody wins. So now, to answer your actual question and use history as well, if you're going to start a conversation with these,
Ty, while you walking,
so is that better?
Yeah, you're making me dizzy. You got to hold your camera straight.
So if you're gonna start a conversation with someone like Biden and this other Harris partner now, it's one around three things: how are you outletting in an equitable fashion funds? Because we always talk about we want, but it's not just that we want. We need funds and structural differences in certain areas. In poor neighborhoods, Black neighborhoods and brown neighborhoods, it's not just about giving money or thing we want to change in school. It's about, okay, taking $1 billion from your military spending that you need to do. Taking $1 billion that are outlay too much. Taking $100 million from public safety and putting it into actual social service programs that create small businesses, that create actual labor forces, and actually increase the union benefit. Because if you're going to just keep, because right now, there's money in poverty, but the money's not coming back into the neighborhoods. So I don't want to maintain the process. How can we build growth? So all legislation now is not talking about building growth. I don't want to hear it. Even here in New York, all the stuff that we're proposing here in New York, I'm not trying to maintain the poor folks in the project. I'm trying to make sure the projects change with them, so they can stay in the projects if they want to. But if it looks like any fantastic new dwelling building down the block. So if you guys are talking about real progressive change for all three of those communities and stopping the xenophobia, stopping the racism, stopping the classism, it's just, as Earl said, I don't use the word slave master, but it's the same exact shit. Slave master, feudal lord. So the conversation, and just to touch on the LGBTQ thing, I've always been opposed to that thinking for two reasons. Being gay or being straight doesn't make you a battle. If you want to be, if we didn't have LGBTQ, they'll be processed and definitively discriminated against. So we have to give anyone a chance to have their equity. Now, what you said earlier about being organized, yes, but black gays and black lesbians will tell you, and black trans, they don't get the same love as their white counterparts. So in the end, it still comes down to still recognizing the differences, or how do we challenge and beat racism, xenophobia, and classism. They're always gonna come back to that. They're gonna treat people whack and brown and black whack.
Okay. Anybody else want to jump in on this? Hanif. Oh, I'm sorry. You gotta put your hand up where I can see you, Minnie.
I got a question. For the brother who's just speaking, Sun God, about making sure that everyone else gets equity too. Now, is that something that we should take on simultaneously? Because I know historically speaking, those very things contributed to our downfall, making sure everybody, had a piece of the pie and all that. So is that something we do simultaneously, or is that something we do after we get our equity?
I answer that backwards. First of all, the lie that has been presented to us by white people is that everybody has access to their shit. It's not true. It's only certain white people. It's upper middle class and rich folks. That's number one. They keep pushing this lie on their own white people, which is why dumbass truckers in Iowa be voting for red, but them dumbasses should be voting for blue along with the rest of us here. Because they ain't got shit. They're on welfare. They're dying of AIDS. They're dying of drugs. And they're dying of fucking COVID. And they're putting their bets into something based on their skin color when the dumbasses don't realize they're being used and abused by the same masters we fight against. So, but you can't create a community of progress if part of your community, any part of it, is fucked up. It doesn't work. So if I got $1 million and Earl got $10, we don't average out to $500,000. We average out to me controlling Earl. Well, if Earl got $250,000, I got $250,000, you got $250,000, and the other sister got $250,000, now we're a community with some power and some money. Now we all can come to the table feeling a level of, first of all, personal security and equity. Because we don't build equity across the entire country and across our personal diaspora and across the actual national diaspora, then we're going to have another imbalance. And I'm not with trying to going from one abusive situation to another, because nobody wins. And I'm actually trying to win. But trying to win means providing opportunity and equity for everybody based on their merit, based on their talent, and based on a good old-fashioned word of getting equity. And that's what it really comes down to. Access requires equity, requires opportunity. And that's how you build a nation. You can't build a nation by 10 people of one racial group, 10 people of one racial group, of one gender group, of that racial group controlling everybody. It's just not going to work at all. So but to answer the other part of the question, when I go black first, you're goddamn right. So I'm first going to put the oxygen tank on you, and then I'm going to get one of them. But always knowing that I'm going to get one of them too. I'm not going to lie to myself. I need them to spend money on your businesses.
Okay. Let's see. Rob got his hand up. Go ahead, Rob.
So I agree with somewhat of what Ty's saying, and I understand where Minnie's coming from. It's not our job to build equity among all the other groups. That's their job. They got to hold their own nuts. We don't have the equity. They already have some equity. We're at the bottom of the palette when it comes to equity. And when you've got people talking about
the people say that without data. There's no data on the planet that proves that white people as a group have equity. They don't. It's an absolute lie that white people have been telling us. White folks ain't got no fucking money. Rich white people got money, and when you average the bitch out, they have money. That's not the same as saying white people have money. They ain't got no fucking money. They got shit.
Well, I was in a meeting recently where a black person said black people don't have money. We all know that's not true.
Well,
so when you've got the sociologists talking about, oh, we got to be more like Norway or Japan's got low inflation and low unemployment, but those are homogeneous countries. The United States is a heterogeneous, very diverse country. But going back to Daryl's original question, I think we just swapped one white supremacist for another. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of policies come out, because we know how Joe Biden, how Biden's been acting, and we know how Kamala, what her records, we know what their records are. So it'll be interesting to see what they're going to do. I like the contract with Black America that Ice Cube was presenting, which isn't, Ice Cube, we work with a lot of different people on that. Just everyone says Ice Cube, and he's the face because he's the most recognizable. But a lot of people have been working with Ice Cube on that, and there's actually been a contract, not called a contract with Black America, but a similar construct that was created way back. And Ice Cube used his notoriety and his fame to kind of push it forward. That's a good start, because when you looked at the Platinum Plan or Joe Biden's plan, it starts off Black, but then it gets diluted with that whole people of color,
minorities.
And I mean, that's all deflection to take away from us, and the whole LGBTQ thing. Plus, Ty, you kind of hit it on the head. Where at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is, what your nationality is, what your ethnicity is. You're Black first, and if you don't believe you're Black first, you will get your wake up call real fast. I've got people in my family that are LGBTQ, and I love them, but they're Black first, and they know they're Black first.
I think we conflate issues to make people conflate, not we. People conflate their internal issues as greater than the issues of others. The one thing traveling has allowed me to realize that everyone's issue is important to them. And all these issues are intertwined because we live here. We're not a Black country talking to other Latino countries or African countries or Asian countries or white countries. Until we leave this place, which, as Earl would tell you, I am the first one on the boat. I will be the steward if you need me to carry the bags. I'm down for you. But if we're going to be here, we have to make sure the situations benefit us. But we can't be beneficial to the point where we're like the Orthodox Jews, where we build and everyone else loses. If you do that, then you don't build out the actual systems that make everyone survive. We are not on the island, not even a peninsula, baby. It really is a whole place where we all have to figure out how we interchange. So that concept of thinking has to change a little bit. Now, if this white guy comes in there and acts like if we go back to the regular racism that we had before Trump, then it's the same old bullshit. If his rhetoric is true, because I think right now he's just being progressive adjacent just to get in office, personally, until otherwise told. But that's the kind of thinking. Real progressive thinking is about how does the communities win internally, and how those communities win internally to then intersect with each other so the actual larger body wins. If we're not doing that, then we're going to have the same problem in a different way. I'm not really into that.
Yeah, that's the piece I disagree with, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. Back.
I mean, I can give data on how that shit works. There's no data that says that one wins, another one.
Ty and Rob, I need you guys to hold up. I want to get some structure. I can't have you guys just bouncing back and forth. Mac, you're up. Unmute.
So yesterday, I was gonna say yesterday I was happy. I was happy with the results. I was optimistic, slightly optimistic more than I've had been this entire 4 years. As far as what's next and like Black Agenda, I think to comment on like what are we asking and what is our agenda, I think, and comparing us to these other demographic groups that do have agendas that do get heard over ours, I think it's harder for us to pinpoint exactly what our agenda is because we're not a monolith, and there's so many different sub demographics of our demographic that want different things. One thing that I feel that we all share amongst ourselves as Black Americans is we want a president that aids the issue of police brutality. And what I can say from paying attention this campaign is that Biden and Harris have constantly vocalized their plan for aiding police brutality. And it may not be a plan that we like. It may not be a plan that we think is going to work, or a plan that we think that they're even going to act on. But they did vocalize a plan. So I think all we really can do right now is wait for the inauguration and constantly hold that administration accountable for what they promised during the campaign. That's about as much of Black agenda-ish promises that I've heard from this new administration. And I'm as a Black American citizen, I'm going to make sure that the people are as happy as we are now that we got rid of Trump, that we don't forget to hold them accountable of those certain promises. And but I also wonder, like, if let me think. I also feel that as far as priorities go, his first 100 days isn't going to be addressing any Black agenda issues. I feel like COVID is going to be at the top of his list when he's in office, and anything that we demand of him while he is in office, he'll use COVID as an excuse. Like, we're trying to end the pandemic here. So that I think that's going to be the top priority for a while. I don't know where on the list we are on there. History shows we're probably at the bottom. But at the same time, I also ask, how much does that matter to us and our advancement? Like, do we absolutely need us to be at the very top to continue progressing the way that we have been progressing over the years? And that's more of a question I have for everybody else. Like, how important is it that we are us and our agenda and our needs are at the top of their priority list, or can we continue to advance forward as we have for these past couple of years?
Terrence, if you have 5 people falling off of a cliff, should we not consider our lives just as much of a priority as everybody else's?
Yes, we should.
Okay, so as a Black man, I probably say, yeah, our priority should be at the top, but we have to organize the structure. So I haven't heard from Tanisha. Tanisha, I'm putting you on the spot. Your thoughts?
I've got a few.
Okay.
For the opportunity to jump in there. And I will say, as someone who identifies as a Black lesbian, that yes, my Blackness is first, because it shapes my experience of being a lesbian, and in, predominantly white spaces, LGBT spaces, racism and white supremacy still exists. I mean, you can be part of a marginalized group and still oppress other people. I mean, it's weird how that goes, but it's true. And for Mac and his question, I was thinking, why would it be so bad if our agenda items and priorities were first? I mean, after last all the time. And just because those agenda items would actually have highest priority, it doesn't mean that other folks' needs aren't important. It's just, can we elevate the needs of those who have been marginalized and oppressed for so long? And if folks have difficulty with that, I think it requires that critical self-examination, especially after this election, and knowing that 68 million people voted the other way for the other guy that represented some other ideals. And that's still up for debate, because who knows what's going to happen tomorrow with court cases. So I think we do need to sit down and prioritize what those agenda items are going to be, but then also pay attention to what's constantly going on around us anyway. I spend a lot of time listening to Urban View, Karen Hunter. She does a thing on Saturdays on YouTube with Dr. Greg Carr. And it's every 2 years, there's the possibility for something to change, in politics. And right now, Joe Biden is like our best, worst enemy, right? That's who we sent, who could actually do some things and push the agenda that we need, right? Whether education is a big piece. How are our students being educated to become civically engaged and to know what's going on and how to participate in our processes, right? And for us, do we know about the next elections that are coming up? Georgia, I need y'all to show up for this runoff so that we can get, a democratically controlled Senate. Those things are important. And then what's happening 2 years after that, and also 2 years after that, and so on and so on. How many 16-year-olds are going to turn 18? Are they activated? Are they going to be registered to vote? Are they going to be voting? And just getting this momentum going. So having a group of people maybe that focus on that part, and then another group that focuses on what is this agenda. We're going to have a new Secretary of Education. Do we have people that we want to see elevated in this administration to do that? Because then they'll revamp the curriculum. What are our children learning? What does that look like? You know, because when you take away the barriers and limitations, young people will surpass anything, right? They won't just stop, well, you just want me to do that little bit. They'll keep going. And we need to capitalize on that and then look at some of the other pieces where we've been systemically and institutionally oppressed. I think Black people are more than just the policing issues in community. Not that those things aren't important, because they are, but these other pieces too, you know, being left behind in the financial sector and real estate, you know, in education, right? Like, let's talk about all of this stuff and have that as part of our agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Tanisha. Tom.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you clearly.
Okay.
Yes.
So I do want to say a couple of things. One, I think with everything, so I'm going to take a step back, right? So with everything that's going on, it was really good yesterday to step outside and see people celebrating instead of protesting, right? Like, it was in the Northeast, it was just like 70 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. And you really got to see people kind of celebrate for a little while. And it was a little bit of a relief in like the midst of like a whole bunch of craziness going on. So I wanted to say that. But I also realized in all of this, shout out to Philly, shout out to like Milwaukee, shout out to like, you know, the ATL, like Black people showed up and showed a system that you cannot win without us. And what that got me to thinking about is our politics nowadays seems to be so binary, right? Like, it has to be this or it has to be that. And what I'm realizing is this or that doesn't represent the view of most people. And so I started to ask myself, like, what can we do, right? And the best thing I could come up with is, I think we need to do something like do Gary, Indiana, 1972, like the National Black Convention all over again, right? And I think Black people need to show up, and we need to define what our agenda is, right? And then we have to assert our agenda. Like, I'm not prepared for people like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or any Democrat or any Republican, right, to promote my agenda. I think that we as a people need to show up and define for ourselves our priorities, right? And then actively promote them ourselves. Like, I'm not down with folks being the messenger, you know, for our message. Like, we need to define that message, and we need to, you know, create the space, even if it means creating sort of a viable, you know, national, large scale third party that represents most people, right? And then we show up in that space. Like, if you need to win and you need to move forward, then you cannot do it without us. And, you know, so I think I'm going to stop there before I start ranting, but that's really what I wanted to kind of add to this.
Okay. Who have we not heard from? I see you, Rob. Go for it. You're muted. Rob, you're muted. Thank you.
One of the things talked about the Democrats couldn't win without us. That's true. My concern is they don't like that feeling of having to rely on Black folks. And I think more and more Black folks aren't just arbitrarily voting Democrat any further. I like the idea of a third party. But my fear is that with the new administration coming in, they're going to prioritize everybody else to negate the Black vote. And Dr. Claude Anson's been talking about that, and a lot of other folks have been talking about that for years, how, you know, they keep us in the caste system at the very bottom, and they're going to elevate everybody else to negate the impact that Black folks have in the electoral voting process. One of the things that I wanted to say is I think it's about time that Black people should act a little xenophobic, putting ourselves first, putting our needs first, because for centuries, not years or decades, centuries, that has not been the case. I'm keeping my response short.
I got you. Who's looking to jump in? I see you,
Hanif hasn't said anything.
I see
You
him.
know, as I look at the results of this election, the first thing I want to say is, Biden is the projected winner. Until the Electoral College cast their votes, he is the projected president-elect. Our current president is fighting this in court. I think that's a very important thing to be cognizant of. So until that happens, Biden is still not necessarily in the job yet. That's number one. Number two, one of the things I also looked at when it came to this election cycle was how around the country we saw all these people voting for Biden, but yet we saw Republicans make great gains at the state and local level and at the national level in the House. And we'll find out in January whether they've got the majority in the Senate. So what it says to me is that you have enough people that were upset with this current president that they wanted him out. But when it comes to an agenda that really fits Black people, there's I've heard a lot of things here from everyone else that I agree with, and some things that I'm kind of have questions about. Yes, we're not a monolith, and everyone's going to have, their own particular thoughts about what they think is right, what they think isn't right. But there are certain things that I believe are common to all of us, no matter how much of a monolith we are not, that should be advocated for. And I think, one of the things that really, I think, disturbs me more than anything else about this is that while we're talking about the Black agenda and what it needs to be, or what needs to be advocated, a lot of the people that are having these conversations, I'm not talking about anyone on this panel, but a lot of people having these conversations are going to be the same people that are going to sit down and watch instead of getting up and advocating. And, we've talked about this many times on this show, that the voting that we do is not the political process in and of itself. There has to be an advocacy part. There has to be, a getting out and, just like we have people that got out to register people to vote, to help bring people to the polls, we need that same energy when it comes to, putting an agenda forward. That energy needs to be given to the executive branch, to the judicial branch. That energy needs to be given to the executive branch on the state level, to the judicial branch, and on the local level as well. So while it's, a lot of people are excited about Biden being the projected president-elect, we need to have that same energy to push whatever this collective vision is going to be forward, not just with these conversations we have at home, but with our actions moving forward. How are we going to organize? What is that organization going to be centered around? Are we content with the fact that some of us that are really good at talking about the financial issues in our community? There's some of us that are really good about talking about the educational pieces and realizing that, national Black leadership has, by and large, from my perspective, been a failure for a very long time. So instead of focusing on this one go-to person, why are we not looking at all the go-to people in these areas that are critical for our agenda that can talk about these pieces in these political circles on the local level, on the state level, and on the national level? So those are my thoughts.
I agree with that 100%. I'm a strong believer in structural leadership and not, leadership by personality. Anybody else want to jump in? Brother Earl, I see you shifting. What you thinking? You muted. Wow. You're muted again.
Am I on now?
You're on now, sir.
Okay. Yes, I certainly agree with what the brother said. I think, okay, yes, I agree we're not a monolith, okay? But Jews are not monoliths either, okay? But they don't come to the political table as Orthodox Jews or this, that. They come as all of them. There's no and that's where they're able to retain their power. I think we've been programmed to this separatist type of dish that does us more harm than good. Okay, I ain't never seen Orthodox Jews just talking to politicians, or there's some representative for that and another one for this. I've never seen that. There's a reason. Okay, and I think we would do ourselves a favor if we borrow some of the concepts, some of the strategies that the other voting blocks employ to their success. And I don't think, just sticking there, I don't think Jews are just committed to Democrats or just committed to Republicans. Okay, so every politician always says they're going to support Israel and this, that, and the third, the West Bank, this, that, and the third, all the time. Okay, and they're going with the highest bidder. I think you need to start, if you're not going to put a third party together, you need to consider not being just Democrat, bloc, or Republican. We are with whoever supports our agenda the best.
Okay,
Period.
I agree.
So what if we thought about this a little differently, right? Where it's not about having a unified voice.
Ty,
but
we only see your hand, brother. Yeah, there you go.
It's not about having a unified voice, but having a unified end goal. But what I mean by that, if you want to use Jews or use white supremacists, right? Not trying to be ornery with Earl, but Orthodox Jews and Jews who are religious approach things differently, but they have a couple of things that are important to them. They never want to see the Holocaust again, and their religion is sometimes more important than the national one. That's kind of two things that they work with, even though they may have. So even though the Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn are different than the ones in upstate New York, for example, they have different agendas, but they still based around this one or those two things. We currently, Black people don't have a pain point, or one particular pain point. We used to have one. It was straight up just racism, discrimination. So we built everything around that. So all our plans, so they might be different. I might approach it different than Tanisha, but I will be built on the same idea of trying to avoid or beat or get around racism. We kind of need that again. Because I don't need everyone on the same path. I need them going to the same goal on their particular path. That's how you win a war, by having the different aspects of your battlefronts, your Navy, your Marine, your Army, so forth and so on, all going to the goal of beating the enemy, but in the fashion that they do well. I think that's what the other brother was trying to explain. If I'm wrong, please forgive me, because I'm thinking about that a lot lately. We talk about public safety, and folks concentrate on the police, but then they don't think about the court systems, the corrections, probation, parole. What do those things? How do they play a role in getting our kids out of judicial, not in judicial, and also doing better in terms of criminalization of our neighborhoods? And when you start thinking about all the different facets of the structures against us, you realize it's not one, but they're all committed to a same ideal of controlling commerce, controlling assets, and then creating division amongst people, Black, white, different in capacity. So I think that's something we've been trying to teach the cats here in New York, of really thinking about how do we use our personal or professional pathways for a larger goal, which is the freedom of Black people and then the freedom of all oppressed people.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
I agree with
if I
that.
could add something.
Hold
Yeah,
on,
do you
Tom. Tom, hold on. In the chat, we got a chat. So if you want to go next, you gotta let me know. Mac's been waiting. Mac, say your point, and then we want to go back to Ty unless it ties in. Go for it, Mac. You muted.
I've been thinking about action steps. I keep thinking about action steps because throughout this conversation, we've established that there are many other demographics who get their voice heard on a higher frequency than ours. They attract the attention of these elected officials more than we. So what can our demographic do differently? Or what are we missing that'll captivate the attention of all these new elected officials moving forward? Like after the inauguration's done and we have this new president, we have this new administration, we have these new senators, representatives, city councilors, etc. What should we be doing differently in our communities so that we are heard on the same frequency as all these other demographics? Or is it a lost cause?
It's not. I think Tai Allen just broke that down. When we talk about finding the right angle, finding that one entry point that we can all align on and working on it. He talked about the number of different issues. When you talk about the 60s, racism, it was real simple, racism in its various forms, whether you're talking about segregation, the right to vote, whatever the case may be. We have to find that fine point that folks can rally around. He just broke that down. Tom, and then people, if you want to jump in and answer Mac's question, jump in. But I think Tom was going to say something a little bit earlier, but think about Mac's question. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, actually, what I wanted to add to that was I think there's no reason why, you know, we can't be those elected officials, right? You know, feel how you may about Barack Obama or Kamala Harris, right? The fact is that we've had a black president, and it seems like we're now going to have a black vice president, right? And you know, so I think to myself, there's no reason why we can't build the system to serve us, right? Like we are the system too. And you know, I'm just kind of tired of always trying to figure out how to make our agenda fit into someone else's context. I think that we should be in a space where we start to develop our plan and our agenda, right? And then because everybody now understands that we exist in numbers to be able to shape the system, right? To begin to actually shape the system in such a way where our people are in it, and you know, they are the decision makers, right? We have the ability to have the decision makers that make decisions that benefit us. And I think that if we're going to begin to advocate and actually change the system, then we have to acknowledge that, you know, we no longer, you know, have to be subservient or, you know, have our priority be at the bottom of the list, that we exist in a large enough group that we should be able to define what our issues are, and then have the people and then put the people in place, right, that can make those things real.
But Tom, isn't that part of a larger process in terms of positioning?
Absolutely.
It's not just the
Absolutely.
position, it's about positioning. So it would be a part. I'm thinking back to what Tai Allen had just said a few minutes ago in terms of how we rally and how we look for rallying points. Finding elected
like movements.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was gonna say movements happen around like single issues, right? Like you hit the point on the head, like during the like 50s and 60s, right? Like the modern civil rights movement on some level started around education, right? And access, right? So access to education, access to facilities, right? Access to the ballot box. And you know, those became the things that we kind of focused our energy on it. Someone said it, like we all came from different places, but we had the same goal. And so yeah, I agree with you. I think what we do need to do is clearly define a set of goals, right? It doesn't have to be like, you know, like 1,000-point platform, right? It can be like the 4 or 5 things that we all agree on, and then we build a movement around those issues, and you know, and then we fight those issues until, you know, we don't have to have that conversation anymore, and then we find another 5, right? And I think we can do that. It has to be methodical, right? Look at Georgia, right? Like we are actually having a conversation about Georgia being a blue state. Why? Because people realized that it could, because we existed in numbers and then went through the process, the methodical work of actually making it happen.
Right, as it pertains to the electoral process. But in terms of the political process itself, how does that voting block translate over into political influence to the point where we can control an agenda? And I think that's where we're at. I hear where you're going. We have bits and pieces. We know that we're a voting block. The last couple of days boiled down to them counting votes from Philly, Vegas, Atlanta, Georgia, and Pittsburgh. Large black districts. So you're absolutely right. But let me go to Hanif real quick. Go for it. Hanif?
You know, this is where, and I think this is where we talk about where the voting booth style political process begins. You know, we have to realize that there's some things about what Tom just said that, you know, are part of my answer. There's some of us, and we've said this on this show many times, there's some of us that need to put ourselves in positions to be voted for. And there's some of us that we're looking so far ahead at this national and federal discourse that we don't realize that initial change is going to start at that local discourse where you live. That's that Board of Ed seat that's been vacant for 2 years because no one wants to run for that. That city council seat, you know, that just opened up because a census was done. You know, the discourse And I think this is kind of getting to what Ty is saying. Like, there's an angle that we all need to be agreed upon, and then that angle has to be approached by a multiple. That angle has to be approached multiple ways. You know, the federal legislature is one way, but not everyone's going to go into the legislature. So let's just be blunt about that. Not everyone's going to run for office, but everyone at some point and at some level can advocate. Whether that's writing letters, whether that's becoming a part of a group, whether that's putting a group together to lobby for those changes, finding out what the laws are in your state that allows you to do certain things. You know, like some states have laws where you can go to your state senator and say, this is a law that I want to see happen, and they have to actually put it before committee. Whether it goes anywhere or not is a story. Not every state has those opportunities for its citizens. But a lot of us don't even understand what's available for us, what power we do have, and how we take these numbers that we galvanize together to get to the voting booth and take those same numbers and galvanize to advocate for particular points of our agenda. It goes back to what I said earlier. Every one of us is not going to be strong in terms of economic issues, in terms of educational issues, in terms of civil justice issues. But there are some of us that are strong in these areas. So we have to, if these are the angles that we're going to unify around, we have to be willing to take the areas that we're strong in, rally around, and do something about, instead of trying to put together this one agenda full of things that we know we're not all fully capable of addressing. Address where you're strong and allow the other person who's stronger in another area to address that, and work together, you know, in your respective areas of expertise, so that when someone shouts out at you, well, I know he doesn't know this thing, so I'm gonna go hit him with this. Yo, man, you're the expert on this economic issue. Let me tap you in. Can you come over here for a second and help me deal with this issue? This is how we take this angled approach, is by realizing that we are all capable of doing something, and that we're all capable of learning something and getting towards something in ways that are going to be beneficial to everybody, instead of looking towards one group of people to do something. You know, when they can't, even if you had someone that was completely 100% pro every black point in an agenda that we produce, they're not capable of carrying it out by ourselves.
Right.
So we try to realize that we have to do the work too.
So we need. We had a meeting the other night. I think Rob was there, and we were talking about putting leadership mechanisms in place, and we talked about resource mapping. When we talk about these issues, we have agencies like Tanisha's that normally aren't included in the larger political picture. We'll contact a grassroots organization when we need foot soldiers, street level, to get involved in the process. We'll contact people to bring numbers in. But in terms of really dialoguing with them and engaging them on issues that are actually impacting people, and making sure that they're part of that conversation, because you're talking about resource mapping. So she may be an executive director. She may not want to be involved in the political process, but she brings just as much to the table, if not more, than the personalities. Because let's keep it real. The electoral process is a popularity vote. We have this tendency, when we talk about people elected positions, that goes back to Tom, what Tom was saying. I just want to address that. We're talking electoral process. We're talking personality politics. The most popular guy, the guy who's homegrown, everybody knows him, and we gather around them. But we never gather and organize around the process, which is what you're talking about. I can dig that. Minnie, you're up.
Just a few things that came up that I wanted to comment on, and to address the original question, or one of the original questions, as far as like, what do we expect from, you know, this election and the results and moving forward. And me personally, I expect more of the same foolishness that we've been dealing with historically. I mean, I really sat here and thought about, you know, what has been done systemically and exclusively to the benefit of Black people, and really nothing comes to mind. The only thing that comes close is like the Emancipation Proclamation, but even that was like a Civil War strategy. I can't think of anything that has been done systemically and exclusively for the benefit of Black people. And I think a part of that, I remember you guys, we talked about Ice Cube's plan and how it got diluted linguistically with, you know, language like minorities and people of color. And I think a big part of that is because we haven't provided this system with the language necessary to address us specifically. so that we can have things in place solely for the exclusively for the benefit of Black people. Because what is Black people? What is minorities? What are people? It's so vague that they don't have the language. That the language isn't there for things to be in place specifically and exclusively for us. And it's because we haven't provided it. We've just been going with the flow and letting people address us as they see fit. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is establish a code. It's just like, Sun God and Hanif was saying, it's not for everybody to partake in any one thing or all things. Everybody has to stay in their lane. But if we had a code that we operated by, everyone in their specific lanes could all move and act in accordance with what it is that we want to achieve. If everybody, like, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're not going to do. We're not going to support these type of businesses. We're only going to support those type of businesses. We're only going to address each other a certain way, or we're not going to address each other in a specific way. And I think if we can establish a code, which really is a simple process, I'm not saying it's easy, because a lot of people use those terms interchangeably, but it's a simple process of establishing that code and having that agenda so that we can build the system that we need to liberate ourselves or get that equity. And I like what Sungha was saying, and I just want to elaborate on that because I think it's easily missed, that what I heard anyway was not so much that we have to act in everyone's best interest, but we have to stop seeing things as a person versus person, or white people versus Black people, or Black women versus Black men type of thing. It's got to be the people versus the issues. And if we can get people in agreement and in an alignment with what the issue is, then it'll be much simpler and easier to build those strategic alliances that we need in order to get things done. It's got to be the people versus the issues, not the people.
I just want to read some of the comments on the sidelines. David Millen has been adding. He says there's plenty of data out there. Every economic metric, Black people are at the bottom. We don't even generate enough GDP commensurate with our population of 13%. We underperformed based on our numbers, and we have not gotten our share for a number of reasons. So when you have 13% of the population fighting for 1% or 2% of the economic pie that has been allocated for us, you would get what you have now, and that is crabs in a bucket and every other destructive thing associated with them. He goes on and said we have to push the Biden administration at every level. Nothing will be handed to us. I see what Mac, okay, he had already asked the question. I'm going to throw it back out there again. So we've established that there are a number of demographics who get their voice heard on a higher frequency than ours. So what can our demographic do differently? What are we missing that'll captivate the attention of these new elected officials? And I think people have been addressing that. Mac, you can jump on in if you don't feel your question's been addressed. Talk to us.
So the brother with a really about our lack of economic solvency, basically. One of the things that we all been kind of hitting at, and maybe I missed when I got cut off, is what are we doing on a local and regional level to establish our basis? The young sister who just talked, where she was saying people versus issues. I never thought about it like that, to be honest with you. I always felt it was people versus the us against supremacy. But maybe it may be better to break it down as issues, because the issues come from supremacy, and maybe we missed a larger point. Same thing with the economics. The numbers just gave out. It's an example of that's an issue based around supremacy. To tackle that issue of economics, we tend to not move money to where it's actually needed. So when there's a problem, our first thought, because we've been taught that way, is for Popo to deal with it. That is something that has been ingrained into American society, that when there's an issue, so I'm on the phone. When there's an issue, we first go to the Popo rather than trying to create societal change by investing in ourselves. This is a thing we've been talking about in Brooklyn, talking about renew, reimagine, reinvest, renew. The idea of reimagining is trying to see issues from a radical lens. And that lens can be different for each person. How she sees it, how Earl sees it, all different. But it's an attempt to not just reform a broken cake, but to build a better cake. The reinvest part is to take the money that we see out there and invest it in ways that actually have an outcome. Not to say I'm going to take $10 million and just give it. Because when they say stuff like that, as the brother is saying, someone said it earlier, they say $10 million. We see 2 million, 8 million go to them, and they say they invested it. They don't see people of color. They don't see black people. They don't see anybody but the white man in control. Really putting money into neighborhoods that have a tangible solution attached to them. And the renew part, we got to see ourselves differently, man. Period. There's an issue when we have married ourselves to a culture that's not ours, and we refuse to see it differently. So we make our steps. That's why you have this dumbass 50 Cent talking about him and Lil Wayne supporting a white guy, because they don't see that what they're actually supporting is white supremacy and the issues that are killing us. So he's right. So we have to start to attack things in a really different and a radical lens, and that's going to be different from everybody else. But it has to be new ways. Can't just go. The old ways don't work. We know that. Earl said it earlier. 400 years. We've been saying the same bullshit 400 years. Let's try something different. Let's see. Let's try new ways, new ideas, new theories, new theorems, new rubric, new everything. Fuck it. New shirts. Fuck it. We need some newness going on to make this thing happen.
All right. So I was going to go, before you jumped in, I was going to go to Mac. Ty, I appreciate everything you just said. Mac, back to your question. Kind of thinking, do you feel comfortable with the responses that you've got based on what you had asked earlier?
You better say yes.
I get, yeah, I do. I hear everybody's points. I do. I get it, but I guess what I was looking for was more like specifically what could be done like differently. I guess starting at the local level, like as Springfield Black Americans, what can be done like now to address specific issues specifically.
All right. So anybody can jump in. And I guess it's I guess the issue that we're dealing with is way bigger than Springfield, which is why I like to keep the panel really diverse in terms of people from all over, because sometimes we tend to look at things as if they're in a box. I'm from Connecticut. Where I'm from in Connecticut is no different than what's happening in Springfield. But the question is perfect. In terms of where do we start on the local level, how do you start to build? And I'm gonna go with Tanisha. Let's talk. Where would you recommend we start? Yeah, I like throwing people out there under the spotlight. Normally I grab many, but today it's your turn.
No, that's all right. We've been talking about this in the chat, and you know, I mean, I'm always putting out there like, yeah, I started talking about a lot of these really uncomfortable things or making people uncomfortable, and it was like, okay, well, talking about these things is creating this division. It's like, no, we need to be able to talk about these things so that we can come together. And it's getting to that place of education and knowing like we do have a common enemy. And it is white supremacy. We've been talking about this, and it's like white supremacy is the Windows 10 of this country. It's the operating system, and everything that we do on top of it is basically a program running through that Windows 10. So every solution is still rooted in white supremacy, the way that it works, the way that it's expected to operate. So I agree with Sun God, you know, and that we do need to start doing something different. And that looks like dismantling the operating system that doesn't work. The system doesn't work. So therefore, the programs that run through that system, they also don't work. They can't work. They're not serving us. So I'm talking about when we do move in these spaces and places and we can get in people's ears that we talk about these things and try to have a collective understanding so that that discomfort can go away. Like, oh, no, don't talk about that. And, you know, this is hateful and it's division. No. We need to talk about this. We need to talk about what actually exists in our systems and who's really impacted and how and what that looks like and how they all run together. Because behind all of these societal ills, whether we're talking about climate change, police reform, criminal justice, economic issues, redlining, all of that stuff, what's underneath? White supremacy. That is the operating system. And we need to get rid of the operating system. But first, you got to know that the operating system exists. And for some of us, it's designed to be invisible. Like, oh, what are you talking about? If you can say, oh, what are you talking about? Then the system is working exactly as it was designed. So when somebody like me shows up and says the system doesn't work, you don't have to clutch your pearls and be like, but that's not true. Yes, it is true, because this is why. Let's talk about these things. Talk about it at Sunday dinner. Talk about it at Sunday service. Talk about it when you at the club at night. Like, girl, did you know That's how we start to shift this stuff, and then insert little bits of strategy. What are the missing pieces of information? What do I need you to do? How do we need to move in our communities to push things? Because honestly, what's happening in Springfield, if you live in Springfield, is going to affect you more than what's happening in Washington, D.C. All politics are local. Yeah. Right? Your lived life is going to determine what you pay attention to in politics. Right? What's happening with your kids? Do they have to go to school in the middle of a pandemic? Do you have adequate health care? Right? Who are your city councilors? Who are the school committee members? Who's the mayor? Right? Who also hires the police commissioner and the superintendent of schools and so on and so on and so on. We need to know who people are, which again is a level of education. And the way that all of these systems are structured, all the programs, all the services, is through the Windows 10 white supremacy operating system of the United States. So that's what has to change, but we have to know what it is and talk about the thing and call it out, because shame likes to hide in the dark. So turn the lights on.
You just did. I don't know what to say after that. Yeah. That's
Tanisha, I left your Karen voice.
Just digest that, everybody.
You know what we're like. Yes.
Yeah, I want to jump in on that too.
I got feelings. I got feelings. And listen, that we're not doing this. We're not doing this.
No. That was so on point. One of my favorite quotes from Neely Fuller Jr. is, "If you don't understand white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything you do understand will only confuse you." And what you just said there to me just was like, just highlighted what Neely Fuller Jr. Said 50 years ago. Okay. I think the thing from a local level we have to do is concentrate on economics. Everything that we have had, they have destroyed economically first. Black Wall Street, when we were segregated, we had a black economy. You know, we had our own economy gone. I think we have to focus economically. As someone that's worked in community lending, I have some ideas as to how I think we should progress. It definitely starts with credit unions and our banks. Like black-owned banks. I mean, I think that's what we should be trying to establish first, because we can't fund our revolution because they're damn sure ain't gonna fund it for us. Okay, and I think that's the first understand. That's the first thing we have to do. Is really be pro-black. Okay, who do you have your insurance with? If it's not a black insurance company, shame on you. Where's your money at? It's not a black bank. Shame on you. Okay, I mean, and we got to just get real serious about that. Okay, we can't consolidate no money because we don't. And even the church you go to, okay, where's their money at? It ain't a black bank. Shame on you. Okay, and we got to be so critical that we step to them about that. Okay, we have to step to them about that. Why is your money in Chase Bank? Why? It's not like they're giving you more interest. Why? Okay.
Yeah. Next up. Absolutely, I got you.
Yo, can I jump in for a second? So, Tanisha, I wanted to give you a shout out for your Karen voice. That was spot on. And you're right. You know, one of the things when they talk about like police reform and economic reform, it's not reform. You got to blow the whole system up and you got to start all over again. So when you talk about the Windows 10 operating system of America, you got to blow that whole thing up and develop a whole another operating system. So when people say reform, that's just a dog whistle to deflect you off the real purpose, the real issues and challenges that we face. Minnie wrote something up on.
I was going to bring her up next to address it and then also expound on her point.
Yeah. All right, so I just wanted to talk about this. Daryl and I talk about this all the time. I think one of the issues that we have is that we try to bring everybody in. We try to bring everybody in, but not everybody wants to fight for our community. Not everybody wants to fight for the culture. Some folks are so stuck in white supremacy that they're white supremacists with blackface. So, you know, hey, and we all know some.
You're right.
We all know some.
You're right.
Yeah, I would actually tend to that.
So when you try to bring everybody in, and you've got people like Daryl and I talked about if what's his name? I can't remember his name. The dude who started a revolution, but then
which
his
one?
boys told on him.
Nat Turner. Who you talking about? There's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Nat Turner. Yeah, Nat Turner. We talked about if Nat Turner was resurrected from the grave, the first thing he would say is, "Don't fuck with those niggas over there." And when you try to bring everybody in on the initiative, you know, it's just not going to work. You got to vet folks. You got to pick and choose folks. And let me let you in on a little something. If the white national media is propping up a blackface, you got to be very skeptical of that face because they're propping that person up for a reason.
That's not fair. That's not fair. No, we can't do that. That's not fair.
Okay. All right. Who's that? Is that Ty?
Yes, Ty.
No, Ty wants to build everybody else up.
Hold on. Ty. No. You have to wait your turn. Give me a second. Committee's still waiting. Hold your thought.
All right, that's some bullshit. You can't do that.
All right, go ahead.
I just want to say what Rob said. I've been saying for a while. We do not need everybody. As a matter of fact, needing everybody is what hinders the process, or thinking we need everybody to be involved. And he brought up Nat Turner, but I always like to bring up the Haitian Revolution. One of the main reasons why the Haitian Revolution was so successful because the first thing they did was get rid of the white sympathizers and co-conspirators. That's the first thing they knew they couldn't make a move unless they cleaned house. So, you know, unity is all great, but it's the quality and not necessarily the quantity. And I just wanted to really, really specifically address Mac's question about like, where do we start? And, you know, one thing that we need to do, and we talked about it a few weeks ago, is find out where those interest convergence points are. Like where can we create these strategic alliances with people, and can we create those opportunities instead of waiting for them? And I think one very practical thing that we could all do, everybody, I don't care how old you are, I don't care how young you are, I don't care what your sex is, everybody go get at least $250,000 worth of life insurance. If we want to stop dying and getting murdered, everybody get at least $250,000. I don't care if it's term, whole, get $250,000 worth of life insurance. And when they kill us, I mean, granted, there's a life loss, but we're generating wealth. We're getting the attention of some very powerful lobbyists. You know, insurance companies start going to the state like, hey, listen, get your cops in order because they're playing with our money. I think that is one thing we could do very quickly, and that it would be effective. And also, like Max said, you know, white supremacy is so broad and it's so multifaceted, and we got all these programs running through this faulty operating system. No matter where you are in the system, be Black first, and look to wherever arena you are in, whether in academics, creative, whether in education, whether in politics, look at how we're being disenfranchised. Really look at how we're being adversely affected by this program, by this system, and see how you can be a chink in that armor. See how you can make a difference, whether or not, if you're a teacher, don't be the teacher who's harder, or at least publicly harder on the Black kids, or whether you're white or Black, doesn't matter. If you're you know, a creative, if you're a artist, there's something that you can do to adversely affect this system that's suppressing us. Find out what that is and team up with other people that are in that arena so that you can be a force. And at the very least, we can move forward that way. If we can't, won't come up with a code, agenda, and a system. Everybody within their own universe and their own sphere of influence can have an adverse effect and a positive effect in bringing down the system.
Then
Yo,
you're gonna
Minnie,
do all
when
that
you
and just
said
sit back,
that life insurance
Hold
thing,
up, Rob. You're gonna do all that and just sit back real cool.
that
I think
life
I just put in
insurance
the
thing,
chat.
Yeah, I was keeping that too,
it's
D. I
so
was like,
dope.
really?
Code.
Hold up. Go ahead. Hold on, Rob. I think what'd you say, Ty?
All that, and then slip back in the chair like, what, niggas, what?
Trust black women.
Yeah, she's a real MC.
That was deep.
That
That was
life
nice.
insurance thing is so dope because we talked to Dal, you and I talked about this. Slaves are more protected during slavery than
Then you
black
got
people
now.
are now because they were insured.
That's
They were
right.
insured.
They were insured
We were
under
the
the
property
slave master
value.
insurance policy. So you just weren't gonna kill a slave because then that's gonna impact the insurance. And the other day I watched Hidden Figures for like the 10th time, and to kind of go
Yes.
back, another thing that Minnie said, when the black woman who was trying to be the supervisor learned how to work that IBM machine, and that white lady was like, okay, yeah, we're gonna have you go work up in there. What did she do? She said, well, what about my girls? I'm not going if they're not going. So she didn't just run for the bag for herself. She looked out for her whole crew. And we got to get back into that habit.
Yes.
Oh, I want to jump
So,
on that.
can we segue for that then and go back?
All right, real quick.
So,
Tanisha,
you
hold
just said-
that
you
thought
just said
real
a
quick
second
because
ago.
he's determined to get this thought out. Go, Ty.
Yo, because you just said
Go
a
ahead,
second
brother.
ago, when someone gets national attention, we should give them an extra eye. Like, so when we
Yeah, I
get
said
successful at something, that is not the white media can't anoint our leadership. That's not we should do ourselves. But if they're talking about our leadership and giving them another way to help us, we can't now give them a strange eye. You gotta check what people's doing. You gotta check what their pastors, where their money coming from. You can't just wholesale. Because I'll tell you right now, I got three kids right now who getting national attention. I know who trained them because I did. So I know they're about that life. So it's not like they're on some bullshit and they're gonna take the money and run tomorrow. They actually, one of them got arrested and got killed. So it's not, we can't just wholesale do that. We gotta do what you just said. We gotta take when we can, as many of us going forward, and not come into the room because we do that to each other all the time. We crabbing the barrel way too much. It ain't gonna work.
Ty, can I jump in real quick? I'm gonna tell you, having worked for this local municipality down here, Rob, you can attest to that. I don't know how many people threw me in the garbage just because of the job. Let me say it again, quote unquote job that I had.
I remember.
I
I was there
the
with
same
you.
way we look, so I agree with you on this one. We can't just throw people out before determining what their value is. Nobody has no idea what type of work happens in the background. They don't know what you're organizing, what you're doing. It's just, well, you wear a suit, tie, you work for the man, so you must be the man. I think we really have to be very, very, very careful. I agree with Rob. Everybody has to be vetted, but I think we have to be careful with that.
But it goes back to what Nick said earlier. What I was trying to say earlier. I know I have gotten into beef with people in the BLM because I know a lot of cops. But, and Earl's gonna laugh at this, a lot of you cops I know because I played ball with them or against them when I was in like 5th grade. They chose one path, I chose another path. But because I know cops in white shirts, you don't get shot. I show up, they go, oh, you with Ty? You with Allen? All right, cool. We might not arrest you now. So everyone had a job to do. And I know that me being there helps keep kids alive. But I got beef for that. But everyone has their different position and what their power and their influence, better yet, what their parallel channel is to the movement. You got to figure out what your parallel channel is for the guy next to you, the woman next to you, or they next to you, and then you move and you do what you do. You might be faster or slower, but everybody's participation means something if they're about that life. If they're not, then we get them off the parallel.
Ty, before we go to Tanisha, I think it goes back to what was said earlier about resource mapping. Sometimes we discard valuable resources without looking in and doing the proper investigatory work. We just we cancel people out and we keep moving. But we have to let folks. We have to resource map, even when it comes to leadership, because sometimes leadership is based on personality and not body of work. So when we resource map, we figure out who's who and what they do. It goes back to your point earlier. So I'm with you. Tanisha, you are up.
Yeah, so I love the strategy about the life insurance as a strategy for wealth. And what I put in the chat was like, in a former life, I could tell you all about that stuff and how white people use that for exactly that purpose. And they would take out ridiculous life insurance policies, and it's like nobody's going to make it out alive. So how do you build generational wealth? Like just like that. And yeah, it incentivizes maybe not killing us. If the translation is going to be okay, well, then they're going to get wealthy off of all this killing. We should not do that. And we were the property. We were the thing that was insured. Daryl, I'm with you. I'm from the A60. Insurance, Hartford is the insurance capital, or it was. And yeah, the policy is written on our bodies, and we need to take advantage of that. In addition to, like, a GoFundMe is not life insurance, and these are preventable things in our community. So we can start to do this and have these conversations and also build up our local businesses, right? Like other communities have their own credit union, they have this thing, like all other communities, and nobody makes a fuss. But when Black people decide to do it, it's a problem. It gets torn down. And I think we can recreate the successes of our ancestors and build up our own successful communities. You know, Tulsa, places like that, like we can do that and learn from those mistakes and just build that way, interject these things into our communities, revitalize ourselves, build. And we do need to take those vetted people with us. Like that's an important part. Like, well, I'm not just going to be the elevated one. Like I need to take my people with me, but we also got to, everybody can't go. Some people, they won't, they are steeped in white supremacy and don't know it, like their own oppression. They're complicit in their own oppression because to talk about it is, it destroys their reality. It's like, okay, stay where you are. And I'm going this way, and take the right people with us. And yes, talk about what it means to play your position. This is a relay race and everybody gets a leg. And that's different than a marathon where that's one person running to exhaustion. We can't do this work exhausted. Right. So everybody get a lane. You run your leg. It's fresh for the next person. And we just keep going. And we know what our goal is at the finish line. And with that information, like we all know where we're trying to go. And it's like, I don't care who gets the credit. Like, are we going to be on the other side, free and liberated, talking about, well, I made sure we got liberated. I don't care who did it. Can we just get free?
Exactly.
Like,
get free. Just let me be free. Thanks. Thank you. Here we go. Hanif, you're up. Let me be free.
Revolutionary Olympics over here and shit.
There's so much to unpack. One of the things I think about is like we talk about, you know, when we talk about getting life insurance for ourselves, and we talk about how we were insured as people when we were slaves. I mean, we still see that kind of mentality today. I mean, look at the NFL. They call training, they call the time before the draft the combine. You know what else was called the combine? When slaves were on display to be purchased. And just like that, the NFL players, the teams, get insurance on their players to protect their economic losses if that player gets injured. So like a lot of these mentalities and things, they're still around. They've shifted. And like the more we become educated about what's out there and what's available using life insurance, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with what Minnie said, you know, about life insurance. And in another life, I used to sell that stuff. So I know how many people use it for all these various different things. But, you know, the thing that it keeps coming down to for me when I keep hearing this is that, you know, everybody, and I mean everybody, has a lane. Everyone has something they can do. You know, everyone has something they're capable of doing, an expertise, something that someone else doesn't have. And I think one of the things that I've seen, at least in my lifetime, is more people looking for credit to be the next big person, to be the next national attention, to be the next person that's in charge, you know, over a group of people to have a following, versus being the person that just does this work, like what Tanisha was saying. You know, and when we talk about resource mapping, you know, you and I were having a conversation recently about the difference between position and positioning. You know, and I think part of our resource mapping when we do that is having to kind of look at, you know, who's in position to do something versus, you know, that may have a good short-term effect versus who's positioning themselves for the long term. And where are you positioning yourself? Are you positioning yourself in a place just to be seen, or are you positioning yourself in a place to be effective? I mean, we got a lot of people that want to play a role, but they put themselves in a place that's not effective because it's not where they have the most knowledge, the most experience, or where they can have the biggest impact. So our resource mapping, I think when we talk about this, we talk about, okay, who can do what which organization can do this, who can do this part, but also like who is actually good at this. Like we got people that'll volunteer for stuff. It's like I hate to say it, it's like church committees. You know, people volunteer for this committee at church, this committee at church, this committee at church, and then nothing happens because the people volunteering for said committees don't actually know how to fulfill the role that said committee needs to fulfill for said goal the committee was for. So we got to make sure that as we're organizing, that we're organizing in a place of maximum effectiveness, not maximum exposure.
Daryl, you're muted.
Okay, hold on. That's Minnie's fault. She made me mute. I'm blaming her. Ty, I know you have to leave. Is there anything you want to say before you jump off?
But first of all, it's nice to have good, spirited, honest conversation with people.
Yes.
I do appreciate that. I will say something to consider. The one thing that the founding fathers did and fucked up on, but it's a good thing. They created a system that can be changed radically. We gotta take it. If we're gonna be here, let's take that shit and fuck it up. Because you can legally fuck it up. We gotta start putting people in power that we trust. People in power who not just serve our interests, but are of our interests. There's a difference in the two. Of our interests mean they will be in committee with us. They will be in community with us as we get these things done. Let's change this shit. If we do it, maybe things might be better. But I'm still gonna always advocate us getting up, packing our bags, and fucking leaving. I'm always for that first. I'm always, you're never gonna get me not to be for that first. But while I'm here, I'm gonna still be, political theorist and strategist and get shit done, like getting Daryl elected. But that's another conversation.
Yeah, I think I'm out. Well, I'm out of that. I want to work on the organizing side. Ty, I want to thank you for joining us on deck, man. We appreciate you, bro. Thank you.
Let's leave. Oh, sorry. One time.
Hey, man, look, that's what Marcus Garvey said, man. He said, let's get about this junk.
So we may have to do that. I seen Brother Earl, before I put you up, I just want to read some of the comments because the sidelines have been active. I seen somewhere where Emma said, and the younger, in regards to the insurance, she said, and the younger you begin, the more affordable it is. So just want to throw that out there. She also said, in this area, the closest Black-owned bank is One United in Boston. One of the issues is that there are limited choices of institutions that have Black people's interests at heart. So what can be done economically to shift those positions today? If we live in an area where there are no black banking institutions, no credit unions, what's our next course of action? Okay.
Well, I
do next. I see you. Go ahead, Earl.
I do think that we have access to online banking that are Black owned. And I do think that's maybe something that we need to do locally is start a credit union. Okay. I think we can start a credit union. Like if 10, 20 concerned Black folk get together, I think we can create a credit union. I don't think that's mission impossible. Okay. So I respect your the reality of the situation in terms of there not being a lot of Black banks and stuff like that. It's just one of those things that I go hard for or have a specific affinity about because the first part of my life was spent as a commercial lender, doing community lending and insurance. I mean, so I definitely was on board with that. That's something that, we talked about for a long time. I even sold insurance. So that's just something I just think that we just need to really be non-excuse about. We have to put our money at places, institutions that we own somehow, some way. That's what we got to do. Okay.
Yep.
That's just it. Okay. The same way you're gonna work overtime to feed your babies. Okay. You ain't gonna say I'm only getting $10 an hour. You're gonna work whatever it is so you can feed them babies. And that's the way we have to, I think, look at the financial piece. the economic piece. Okay, like some years ago, I worked for an organization called Operation Hope. John Hope Bryant was from Cali, but now he was here in New York, you know, in this city. And he had this big thing where he was asking all the employees what we could do for the community. And I told him, and he's filming it. I said, we need to create, if not credit unions, even with the check cashing, we need to create check cashing where instead of charging folks $15 to cash a check, we force we put that towards an IRA. We take 5 for fees and put 10 in an IRA. Okay. We need to create real estate investment trusts where we begin to own our community. This, I know any place we have like succeeded, there has been an economic base, and they have taken our economic floor to the point where way too many of us are dependent upon, you know, welfare and food stamps and stuff like that. And we can't change this until there's an economic floor. Okay, we can't change this.
Got you. Good point. Minnie, you are up. You're muted.
Why, thank you, Mr. Moss. Even if, to go back to the comment about the banking and the credit union, you know, one thing that made us strong or at our strongest, historically speaking, is when we were a matriarchal society. The family is power. There's power in numbers. There's so much power in unity. We could take any bank out here and make it black owned. Even if not black owned, black controlled, black ran, black operated. Do you know what we would do to this city with as many of us who bank if we took all our money out the bank?
Yeah.
We can make our demands. We can say, look, all these black people is going to deposit their money and do their business with this bank or this branch and this branch alone. But this is what we need from you. And if you can't do that, we'll go to somebody else. Or even if they say, okay, this is what we can do. All right, we're going to go to another branch and say, hey, they put this offer up. Can you match that? Can you beat it? Because we got all this money out here that you need or you can benefit from by having all of us use this branch or use this bank. I mean, it really is just that simple. If we could just
I don't
agree on something. Can we agree on the issue, agree on the problem? And even if we were to bring a black bank, we would still or should still take all of our money out of the banks that we're using and put it into that one institute. And that institution should still meet our demands, or we should trust that they're going to act in accordance with our best
I
interests.
hear that, sister. I guess what I'm saying, and again, as someone that has been a VP of commercial lending for these type of banks, you still can't direct underwriting. Okay, you still can't direct vision. Okay, like I literally have been on the inside of these banks. Okay, I can't even say over this line what I've had to go through in doing what you're saying from the inside. Okay, like what I'll share with you is this. Okay, I was so successful in Black community lending, I got a visit from the Secret Service. Okay, I know what it is to do.
I remember that.
Okay, I know what it is to do what you're saying, sis. And I'm saying to you that you can't direct underwriting from that perspective. That's why we have to have, because underwriting directs the projects, the direction, what we're going to fund. Okay, like how we're going to, from an Afrocentric point of view. Okay, no, we're not lending 50,000 to the 20th liquor store. Nope, we're not doing that. We're doing this. That direction and underwriting can only take place when we're in charge.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, yes, there certain banks, local banks may be more, willing to listen a little bit when we are threatening with deposits and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, but we can't direct. That won't direct underwriting.
But
It won't change
but I
underground.
tell you what, it will get everybody's attention.
Right. It'll get some attention. Yes.
And not some. If we get that to the point where it's not just a Harlem thing or a Springfield thing or a Hartford thing,
yes,
you know, when we begin to black out these institutions, they're going to want to work with us because everybody. I mean, let's go back to Harlem Renaissance days. Everybody won nigga pennies. So the bottom line is, we have to at some point draw a line in the sand and say we're not giving up our pennies. We're keeping them home.
Yes.
So, Minnie, I'm riding with you on that. I think we need to black out. I mean, at some point, we have people coming on to talk about school choice. We need to talk about homeschooling again. We need to talk about private institutionalized school systems. When we talk, it's like we start out the conversation talking about Biden and Harris. And now I'm really happy that over the last hour and 15 minutes, there's really been relatively little talk or discussion about them, but more so about what we need to do. And I think the most critical piece I heard tonight is saying, yo, we opened up something and everybody pulled their money out. Now, there's a problem with that too, slight problem, but there's a history with any type of banking institution. And I see, Tanisha, you had mentioned in the chat. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it, you know, for us having banks where the people look like us, we're in control, our money in our communities. I do have an account at One United Bank. You can do it online, and I'll connect that to a local issue. And we had the TD Bank in Mason Square that wanted to close, and it was the only full service bank in that community. And at the time I was like, okay, we'll let them go. And can't we like court One United to come in here because here's a black bank about black people and black stuff, and they would have an investment in actually making loans to black people for homes, for businesses, for things that build power and generational wealth in our community. Because if they want to go, let them go. Like, that's it. And let's get somebody in here that wants to be in here. So I'd entertain conversations like that because that bank already exists and is a black-owned bank, as opposed to we can start one from scratch, which that's a viable option too.
Yep.
But just resources and bandwidth, like, they already exist. Can you just give us a branch, right? And this makes sense because we need this in this community. And we also got to look at the connection to these other things. If you take out a full service bank in a community, it usually forces out some other things. And it's also a stop on the gentrification train, which if we can't keep money in our communities, if we can't get loans for homes in our communities, they don't become our communities. And then the bank comes back when the neighborhood is flipped over and is now Yuppieville. So we've got to talk about these things. We've got to address the historic trauma. Why don't black people want to put their money in the bank? Because our ancestors put money in banks that were destroyed and they lost everything.
Yep.
So I'm gonna keep my money at home, under the mattress, whatever it is, but not in the bank. So we've got to talk about that. When we're doing these educational pieces, we've got to address the trauma that exists in our communities, right? Racialized trauma, intergenerational trauma, post-traumatic slave syndrome. Like, we've got to talk about that so we can heal it and then grow our communities for ourselves and for our future generations, right? Like, I actually care about this now for the grandkids I don't even have yet, but I just know they can't inherit this system. They can't, right? That's what they can't, right? We have to do better than this.
Can you imagine 50 years from now, our grandkids having the same conversation about how they're going to move the agenda forward? Man, my parents had this conversation back when I was a little kid being dragged to those black Democrat meetings. Here I am, I'm in my mid to late 50s, and I'm still having this conversation. So I think at some point, I'm rocking with Minnie and everybody else. At some point, we have to draw that line to say and be like, fuck it, I'm out. We grab our stuff, we shut down their institutions, and we move on. I think we just proved just how critically important our voting block is. Imagine the dollars that come along with that. Imagine how much further along we would be if we had our own schools, if we had our own banking systems. We can do it. I mean, nothing's impossible. So I just want to put it out there. But I do know that we are at the 5-minute mark. So at this point, unfortunately, I have to wrap this up. And Tanisha, since you're on, I'm going to hit you up. You can start with the closing thoughts.
Well, I love these conversations. I'm glad that we're having them. Like I said, talking about the thing doesn't create the division. The division's already here. Talking about it is one of the things that's going to help us get to a place of closing that divide. Because yes, we do have a lot more in common than different, but we've just been so deeply socialized to focus on difference. I think we would just create it if it didn't exist. So let's keep having these conversations, doing the hard things until they just become regular parts of our dialogue. And we can do this. We have to, because if we don't, yeah, are our grandkids going to be talking about this 50, 60 years from now? Like, we got to get it together.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tanisha. Hanif,
You know, these conversations are very important, but as always, we have to make sure that at the end of these conversations, those of us that are willing and able are actually putting some action to these conversations. You know, where are our resource maps? Who have we contacted? Who are we? How are we coordinating our efforts? What are we doing to make sure that these conversations go from something we're saying right now to conversations that our kids don't have and grandkids don't have to have 50 years from now? We want the conversation 50 years from now to be, man, 50 years ago they were talking about this and they did something. Now it's our turn to do something else to make it even better. This is not a sprint, you know. And one of the reasons why we sometimes fail at these things is that we don't understand that this agenda of white supremacy is a generational one. It always has been. It always will be. And if we're not planning for cooperation, finding where you fit, doing it, and thinking about this for generations down the road, we're going to continue the same circle we've been doing for the last 400 plus years. And I'm not with that.
okay. Well, my life is committed to it, so I'm with you. Let's see. My brother Earl, talk to me.
I just want to say that, like what's already been said, yes, I'm thoroughly enjoyed this discussion, and it is more important that we take the energy and the things that we've learned from each other from this conversation out in the real world. There is no shame in making your corner of the world a better place for our people. There's no shame. There's nothing small, too small in that regard. Okay, whether it's working with our kids in kindergarten, okay, or helping high schoolers, you know, prepare for the SAT, or doing entrepreneurial training. There's no task that is too small or insignificant in this march, in this marathon. You know, like they say, the marathon continues. And I'm certainly committed to it. I think I've done something one way or another the last 35 years. So I ain't going nowhere.
All right. Let's see. Next up is Minnie. Talk to us.
I just want to say that there is nothing that we can't do. Absolutely nothing. And if you think about it, there isn't much we haven't done. Well, what haven't we already done? And we need to get organized. When that bank was leaving, people were scared. People were scared about how they were going to get access to their money and cash their checks. And we have to be a better family in order to mitigate that fear and those risks. There shouldn't be a grandmother out there worried about how she's going to get to where she needs to be and do the things that she needs to get done. We have to get organized. We fund and fuel our own oppression. All we have to do is stop. It starts out at micro scale or local scale. And as we get better and more organized, it'll better translate on a macro scale, on a national scale. We have to be a family. That is the institution that's the source of our power. And that's what they attacked. That's what they broke. And that's what we need to fix.
All right, Sister Soldier. Rob Jones.
I think first off, we need to make sure we have the right team in place. Many alluded to this before. If you're starting an NBA franchise, you're not starting it with Swaggy P. You know, you're starting it with LeBron or AD or Kevin Durant.
Swaggy P.
I was gonna say Mitch Kupchak, but some of these folks are too young to know who that is.
But Mitch was kind of good, though. He was kind of good.
Yeah, not that. Yeah.
Come on, focus, y'all. Let's focus.
Yeah. So, you know, work with people who have a body of work and who are committed to the cause. I would say, Black first. It's time to be a little xenophobic. We fought everybody's battles for them. It's time for them to hold their own nuts. Let them fight their own battles. We're not here for, we got enough that we need to do. Let's fight our own battles and let everybody else leave them to their own devices. Work with people or voting locally. Putting candidates in that just don't talk in platitudes, but will actually put pen to paper and really press on and push on with issues and areas that are germane to the Black community, and we go from there. So, just Black first, and create your super team, and from there you'll attract others. There's always people waiting on the periphery. People want to be led, but a lot of people are watch. They sit on the sidelines and watch, and then when they see when things get going, then they jump in the fray. But again, leave the coons out and leave the naysayers out. That's all
the sellouts, they die first.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Real quick, I'm looking at some of the comments. Tanisha wrote in the comments, when we know and understand that our ancestors were the economy, we must address the disparities that come with that. We have always had the power. We need to understand how to harness that for our greater good. MJC said the problem with banking, going back to the banking, the problem with banking with a non-local institution is that they reinvest their funds in the areas that they're present in, not in the communities that we live in. I think it's important to keep the dollars circulating within a smaller geographical area. Dave Milner says they will spend some political capital on us in reference to, I'm not sure which part of the conversation we're in. But I just want to say, I want to thank everybody. And just remember that, everything, all politics is local, no matter where you live in this country. And I think we really have to engage our families. Some people say our elders, some say women, some say youth. I say our families because we're really talking about our families. And there has to be a transition plan. Black families must be engaged and inspired critical members of the strategic process. That's what real leadership, that's what real leaders do. That's what real leadership is all about. Everybody wants to be a leader, but nobody wants to pound the pavement. Nobody wants to open the doors, create comfortable spaces for us to grow in. And I think we're going to move this agenda forward. Ideas are great. Generating ideas is even better. But if we're not creating platforms and opportunities for people to be exposed and have access to those ideas, because we have no ideas, Minnie's little daughter, her beautiful little daughter may have to pull all these plans together. We have to include our families in these conversations. I agree with what Tanisha said earlier. It's all about creating comfortable, safe spaces, ensuring that people know exactly what our strategic plan is. Folks don't need to know all the details, but they need to know that there is a plan. The other piece is, as we forge forward, we need to understand that this battle is about process. We have to counter it with process and not personality. I don't give a damn who your family is. I don't care where you grew up. I don't care how much money you have, and I can care less who you work for. Are you committed to the struggle of Black people? Do you have a body of work? Are you willing to get down and work with the lowest cat to the highest cat on the block? We got to, we have to take this stuff and we have to put a system in place so that we can move forward. With that being said, have a good day, everybody. Thank you for joining us on Deck. We'll be back next Sunday like we always are. Love y'all. Brilliant conversation. Peace, everybody.
Later.
Gods walked in. Rejoice!